My name is Huey Ong, and I lead the security organization at Cisco and APJC. And I recently relocated to Singapore in July last year from the Bay Area, and I hope to be back in Taipei much more often. This is actually my second time to Taipei. The first one was 16 years ago when I was building medical products. But thank you to our loyal Cisco customers, our new customers, and those who are here to see that what we're doing in the agentic era. First, I want to say it's a tough act to follow, our senior VP and CISO. But now I know who I'm looking at, who's blocking my USB port, why my WhatsApp web doesn't work, why I can't copy a file to Google Drive. But in all joking aside, we're living in this agentic era. Where identity and trust, you're going to hear it over and over again. But I just want to share one more thing about my trip to Taipei. Amazing food, amazing sights. I think I've eaten more xiaolong pao than I could handle. But the most impressive thing is, of all the meetings I think Jason and I had, I've never met so many professors, PhDs, master degree holders in every meeting that I had. So I assume that probably half of you all are PhD holders, so it's and master holders, so I'm very, very humble to be here. Okay, so, and that's me again. So we talked about identity and trust, but what's happening in this world today is that last month, in the words of our trust officer and our CISO, that fundamentally the unparalleled knowledge of code and software these models have today, they surpass a threshold. This, in the quote that was given, it's fundamentally changed the way we look at security and how do we protect organizations, because in reality there's no turning back. So the frontier models today, whether it's Mythos today, OpenAI tomorrow, it is leapfrogging over each other. As you know, Mythos is estimated to be about 10 trillion parameters, a big jump from about 1 to 2 million from the previous Opus model. So what we're going to be seeing a lot is, a hyper acceleration of identity, trust, combined with CVEs, P-certs, incidents, that is going to accelerate so much. So as a result, what do we think the vehicle for these attacks will be? Will be with the agents. So AI agents doing the attacks, AI agents doing probably the threat. So your biggest asset could be your biggest liability as well. So when the threat surface has changed, we're looking at something that's grown exponentially. So we require a new way that we define identity, how do we define trust, and how do we define response. So Cisco has had a very long commitment to security. So it's foundational to all the products that we build. Just in the last 2 months, there were 2 acquisition announcements, all around identity and trust. The first is Galileo, which will be built into our Splunk product. It's about agent observability. And the second was just announced a few days ago, for those who may have heard, is Asterisk. So it's a company that specializes in agent security, agent profiling, and what we call NHIs today, non-human identity. So within the next few months, we'll be seeing a hyper acceleration of product releases, and I'll be happy to share a few with you. I know Jason's gone through quite a bit of it, but I'll go a little bit deeper. So no doubt there will be a surge of incident CVEs and urgent upgrades that we'll be seeing in our network. We have aging legacy products that's still in the systems. We estimate about 30% of product that's out there sitting at a critical infrastructure that may be at the end of life. For those who do patching and life cycle, we know how extremely difficult this is, because in every product, not just Cisco products, you have the end of sale announcement, You have the end of support and a hardware support, and then last day of shipping, and then finally no more patches, no more releases, right? So that presents a real risk. So globally, Cisco Talos, which is our threat intelligence and response organization, we observe 900 security events a day. So that's it's about 886 billion. So I would say 900 billion. And it samples about 2,000 malware samples a minute. So what we're seeing is there is a measurement called TTE, time to exploit, to when a CVE is released. So 5 years ago, the measurement was in weeks. So 2021, probably about 3 to 4 weeks. So that's the turnaround. CVE published, exploit happens. 2 years ago, it was measured in days. And if you can guess it, in today's 2026, CISA, which is the United States cybersecurity agency, estimates that 50% of all exploits are now day zero. It could be probably minus day zero, but we're already seeing it happening in Asia Pacific. So no doubt that Taiwan, the numbers in Taiwan will increase. These are some of the numbers. And I'll take you to this slide. This is a double-blind survey called the AI Readiness Index. And for the Taiwan numbers, we're taking 200 respondents, so cyber professionals that are surveyed. And as you can see, about 82% say that they have plans for AI agents, but only about a quarter of them say they're really prepared, to secure them. Maybe a show of hands, has anyone tried OpenClaw or at least toyed around with it? I know there's a whole bunch of PhDs here, right? So what do you do first when you look at OpenClaw? You connect the agent to a model. And actually, before you do that, you have to sign off a liability to say you understand the risk. But when you do that, you connect to the model, you give it a name, you look at the skills, and then you perform the task, whether you want to manage your calendar or so. But I'll give an example, right, what would be happening in the environment. So let's say we have an employee, I'll give her name Crystal, and she's in sales. So we expect human workers and AI agents to be outnumbered more AI agents. So be prepared in the next year or so that you'll be having digital coworkers or digital agents working for you. But what happens is Crystal, as a salesperson, she's going to be performing a task. She will be using it to respond to her emails, her calendar, open up Salesforce, being able to input. Remember, in OpenClaw, there are no boundaries. It can perform, it can overwrite, it can upload, it can write code. So as an employee, she decides, okay, you know what, I want to have my personal calendar. I want to be able to make my hair appointments and nail appointments and also have access to my bank to do transfers. So you can see the inherent, no guardrails. And that's what we're seeing today, because everything that we're dealing today is about credentials and trust. So that's why identity and access management becomes way more important today. If you see the market kind of moving around, it's because there's that focus because of identity. Okay. So agents become the target, and they are the source of threats as well. So the MCP is the connector. So what happens is via API or CLI, the MCP serves as a client and server relationship to connect agents into data resources and access a bridge. But this creates a very wide, large, distinct attack surface. Because when the client is compromised, MCP is compromised, it carries tremendous risks. You can have indirect prompt injections, hidden instructions. Compromised agent can carry remote code execution. It does data scraping or exfiltration and provide persistent authorized access. So what we're seeing a lot is, if you look at this slide, right, 60% of incidents now happen where it is really credential involved. So breaches leverage where identity is the key component. So we have to really reimagine the way we look at the agentic workforce that's going to be coming in. Right? As mentioned, the attacks could be by agents, and the targets will be your agents as well. And aided by these advanced LLM models, it's unsurpassed knowledge of software. So the frontier models will make it much easier as an entry barrier for the threats. Okay. So as a corporation, banking, finance, retail, there is a journey of taking agentic workforce from a low friction to a high value, right? So there's 4 steps. The first step, most of you, I would estimate that everyone's probably in the first or second step, which is really knowing the agents, right? Addressing the immediate need for visibility. So visibility is key. And you have to discover what's sanctioned. I give you the example of our workforce agent, Crystal, and her AI agents. So what happens is you have to discover what's sanctioned and what's unsanctioned. And most companies can't really understand what is operating in their environment. And then the second one is securing the agents, because agents will use credentials, right? We talk about OpenClaw. The first or second thing you will do is input your credentials. So replacing prior generation static credentials with strong, centrally managed, modern, authentication methods. And the third one is controlling AI access, because if you look at the traditional identity access management, it's unfettered control. So what happens is when you have granular policy, understanding what her agent can do, can it combine code, can it access, for example, Hugging Face, can it do things that it shouldn't be. So it's really about granular controls and enforced least privilege. So that's where zero trust falls in place. And the last phase is governance. So putting back trust and safety into your AI models. So I would say for most organizations, most of us, we're probably in the first or second step. But if anyone's probably already surpassed it to the fourth, please let us know, because we'll love to have you speak at our next event, which is in July, right, at Cisco Live. Okay. So the 3 buckets for anything that you want to think about is the workforce. So the workforce would be human, non-human, physical, robotics, devices, IoT. So you got the workforce. And then secondly, they need to connect to their workloads. So the workloads exist at the edge. It's private, it could be public, it could be hybrid. And then it goes into the workplace. So the workplace is anywhere and probably any time. So you look at it, workforce, workload, workplace. So Cisco is infusing security at every layer in infrastructure, because if you look at how data moves across, the attack can happen at machine speed. So for any particular thing that you want to think about, it will fall under these 3 buckets, where it's a workforce, where it's a workload, and it's a workplace. So all areas have to be secured, and it has to be secured in every layer. Okay, so how do we enforce the workplace, workload, and workplace? And our core solutions are in place. So identity becomes really important. And this is, again, I've talked about identity and trust being key. It's foundational to differentiate human versus non-human traffic. There are certain behavior differences I will share a little bit on the next subsequent slides. But it is really about connectivity as well. So Dual IAM is our agentic identity access management, following the principles of authentication, accounting, authorization, the AAA. And then secure access is our zero trust solution that takes you from the workplace into your workload. And lastly, your models have to be secure as well. Today's model may reside in the cloud, it may reside on-prem, but small language models inherently will start moving into the edge. So we have to look at these 3 layers, and these are our solutions in place. And it's also it's very important to understand the machine data telemetry. When you talk about AI agents and their behavior, they have to be governed, and there has to be visibility as well. So it's where Splunk and the machine data comes in. Okay, so the principles of zero trust applies even more. And at a high level, it comes down to 3 buckets again. So first, knowing every agent. So you need visibility, and you need to know the identity of every agent. Secondly is authorization. So when it comes to authorize every action, it's where are you going, from where, how long. I guess it's no different than your significant others asking you every night when you go out, right? So that's the check. Everything is checked. Workflow is checked against policy. And the third is adapting to real time. So real time means real time knowledge of what's going on and the ability to enforce it. So I'll go a little bit more deeper into this knowing, and because identity and visibility, most organizations today will not be able to answer very basic questions. What agents are actually running in my environment? So this is a feature that was released and announced at RSA about in March, 2 months ago. So first one is agentic and tool discovery. So this is classification, identification of agents that interacts with your enterprise systems. So that's very important. And second one is the principles of AAA accounting. So the attributes that go into records for accounting. And the third one is access policy, defining what the agent can or cannot do. So dual access IDP, it also interacts with your existing IDP. What's important, I think this is my favorite, is human accountability. So we talk about Crystal with her multiple agents. In the enterprise, every AI agent needs to have a human owner. So it comes back to responsibility of the owner. And you can have such granular control so you can have a human authorize every action. Shall I set the appointment? Shall I do an override? Should I, yes, no? So you've seen that, but that is the human in the loop. And lastly is life cycle. Agents will need to be accountable for their life cycle. They need to be patched. They need to be retired as well. So this is a whole new different way of looking at your agents that will be your digital coworker, or they could be working for you. So that is our identity. Secondly is secure access. Secure access is our SSE Zero Trust solution. And what's the difference? How are we unique? How does Cisco differentiate from others? Dual and identity provides the attributes, and secure access will enforce. We can recognize traffic behavior, traffic patterns, because agentic AI behaves very differently. You could have token exchanges, which are short-lived. You would have traffic behavior, authorization patterns. You'll be looking out for certain traffic that say, okay, by geolocation, why is this agent locking to this when they shouldn't have access? So we can do that through firewalling, DNS, data loss prevention, remote browser isolation, layer 4 to 7, IPS. So that's built in, but it's seamless. And because you can enforce it at the boundary, enforce it at the MCP layer, the action is consistent, and then it cannot be bypassed. So those are the two. And we're also enforcing just in time and just long enough, because the interaction, you do not want to have unfettered open access. And then lastly, I'll talk about is AI defense. So this is something that is completely very important, but I think a lot of times overlooked as the models come up, is the ability to discover, detect, and have runtime protection of your actual AI models, whether it exists on-prem or in the cloud. So monitoring public use of AI, we have a lot of use cases with customers where what they want to do is prevent intellectual property leaking or going out. Secondly is visibility to shadow AI that exists in the environment. So it does a scan. Detecting is also the ability to scan for vulnerabilities, so red teaming your models. there's a whole series of testing. So when you have your model ready, you can execute tests to just make sure that your model is safeguarded. For SecOps, it identifies sensitive data that should or shouldn't be in your environment and accessed by end users. And the third one is runtime protection. For those, I guess, been in the industry, you have to have runtime and visibility from outside or inside the threats. And combine all three, I'll just kind of carry this out. It's about intent. So for those who've been following Cisco for a long time, we talk about self-healing. That's becoming available, NGA with LifeProtect. But intent-based is allowing trust scores. So every trust score will be attributed to every AI agent to understand what is the behavior, do I have to re-authenticate, or I just lock them out. So this is dynamic, based on intent, based on threat levels, and on behavior. So they each work as one, but if you combine identity with secure access and AI defense, that's how it works as a package, and it's a force multiplier. And this is how we bring it together. So the real secret sauce is identity-aware connection and zero trust. I keep talking about the trust side, right? This is bringing the entire workforce into the workplace, into their workloads, and this is how we do it. We use techniques such as mass and quick, so your VPN connection is either legacy VPN, UDP-based connections for faster response, but it's completely seamless to internet apps, SaaS apps, to your private data, and wherever it needs to take you into your models and LLMs as well. Okay. So what is the platform advantage? What has been different with Cisco is now taking everything into the single management plane. What you'll be hearing about in further announcements will be, in our security model, everything will be managed through a single pane of glass, whether it's a router, it's a switch, a firewall, your zero trust, everything will be, and even support for third party. It's a single management platform. We call it Security Cloud Control. It's a centralized management, but it is inherently run and AI-driven. So for those firewall engineers out there, AI-driven policy that you can optimize. Everyone remembers that 30,000 line or 100,000 line ACLs, right? Is policy optimization and being able to push policy out into your switch, into your router, into your firewall. So that is, to us, is a game changer because we look at the network as a complete set. So not just an isolation, a boundary firewall versus a router. So this is a policy that's based on intent, and that will be run through Security Cloud Control. And we talk about the data fabric with Splunk, which turns all your machine data into insights. I'm going to move one back. Jason talked a little bit about segmentation using ICE. This is role-based security group tags that makes it simple for you to have segmentation. But all the new innovations that we have, auto-segmentation, I will kind of share that a little bit in the subsequent slides. Okay. So I talked about agentic ops being built into our platform. Even when you open a case with Cisco TAC, a lot of it is AI-driven, taking use cases from past cases to be able to help you resolve your troubleshooting a lot easier. So optimization of configuration is important to minimize human errors. And then when I talk about security for AI, this is really protecting the AI models itself. So we talk about discovery, detection, and then the LLM model runtime protection. So this is about operating in an open environment. So what has changed, I think, in the past few years with Cisco is our contribution to the open source community and integration. So Splunk has over 2,000, almost 3,000 integration points, and then multi-vendor support. I did talk about our policy engine, which also supports third-party firewalls. But what's really important in today's world is it's really a team sport. 2026 gives us a recalibration of the cybersecurity industry, right? Cisco is for transparency, we're for interoperability, and our commitments to the open source community. And the timing couldn't be better. I'll just touch real quick. I'm going to keep going back on the AI agents with the example of OpenClaw. OpenClaw will be able to write code. So some of the GitHub projects we have is called Project Code Guard, so limiting and guarding that. Skill Scanner, do you want your OpenClaw, whether it's NemoClaw or NVIDIA OpenShell, to be able to have that limitation on what it can or cannot do. But what's really important here is telemetry. So with our acquisitions announced and also inherent capabilities with Splunk, you will have visibility to what every agent does. We'll be able to kind of showcase that at some point about agent activity, agent access, and everything will be visible in Splunk. And the timing couldn't be better. Jason talked about Glasswing. And as a cyber professional, we all do understand what stands in our way. What are we keeping safeguards from? Defenders, we have a very unfair disadvantage, because what they say is the attacker only has to find one vulnerability, but the defender has to find it all. So it is about us having not to move fast, but we have to move first. And that's the whole thing behind Project Glasswing, is taking the frontier model back into our practice. So Jason talked about having it to re-look at our code. If you look at where Cisco and most networking security company comes from, you have software everywhere. On the hardware layer, you have your embedded systems, your BIOS, your firmware, your drivers. Secondly, your operating systems. Operating systems inherently will have code vulnerabilities that needs to be discovered and re-looked at. And the third is configuration. So what Mythos allows us to do is look at all three, because traditionally, everyone's looking at one layer but never looking at all three. So what we've learned from the entire exercise is taking a look back into the fundamentals, protecting at the hardware layer, protecting at the OS layer, protecting at the configuration. For those who have operated Cisco firewalls, Cisco routers, Cisco switches, or any vendor, there's always configuration errors or configurations that's missed, ports that are open, telnet, keep alive that's kind of running. So we will be releasing probably in about 30 to 60 days a lot of guidance. The account teams will be looking at disseminating the information with you of all the findings. And to us, it's a return of fundamentals. This is really important, because discovery, baselining, and eliminating your risk and exposure, and having to contain the blast radius. So it comes back to visibility. Visibility of the environment is key. So knowing what is the most protected, what is the most valuable, and how do you safeguard around it. Cyber hygiene, it's about brushing and flossing, but we know that patching is extremely difficult. Life cycle is extremely difficult, keeping up with patch. Per CVE, per patch. Those days are going to be over. Lifecycle management, I talked about it. End of sale, end of life, what's being patched, what's ability to be patched. What we'll see is that products that's reached its end of life, which presents a vulnerability, will have to be removed and replaced with modern architecture. And lastly, I would say, is the AI embedded defenses are here today. And I'll touch on one, because Jason already touched on eBPF and Live Protect. I talked about dual agentic, I talked about secure access. Live Protect is the compensating control using the Tetragon agent. So imagine your infrastructure, your switches running agentic capabilities to be able to auto-update, to be able to have command and control from a single point, to be able to provide micro patches, and auto segment. Because it runs in the kernel, we're able to see every process, every system call, and we're able to provide that compensating control. But what's my favorite that will be announced, and it has been announced, but it'll be GA, is something that we call dual data plane. For those who have been in the industry for a while, the analogy is you're on the airplane and they're going to change the engine while it's flying. For those who work in service provider, you're very familiar with modular iOS. That's the ability to run iOS, XR, XE, being able to modularly start processes and do upgrades modularly without rebooting. But this takes it over a different level. So with the aid of an NPU and CPU, and obviously a DPU for security controls, you will be able, on the next generation switches, will be able to perform a digital twin. So meaning that having a second operating system running, being able to monitor your data plane to see if the new upgrade works and it's running well, and there are no traffic drops and no issues before you flip it over without rebooting. So in the old days, you would download the code into your flash, point the reboot, start the reboot, and kind of pray that it comes up. But that's one of the game changers besides Live Protect. But we also talk about zero trust. We talk about segmentation. The hybrid mesh firewall is that concept of you take policies, single policies that you apply, and we call it the mesh policy. Whether it exists in the firewall, you can send that same policy to a switch port. So every switch port, every trunk can be an enforcement point. And with the eBPF agents, you will be able to have visibility. You can also have enforcement points. So think of it as security that is sprinkled across the entire Cisco infrastructure. And I've talked about Cisco's vision being AI-driven, infrastructure that's AI-ready, and then identity first. So we've recently published a Project Glasswing in detail. This goes really into what our strategy is and what our partners with Project Glasswing. And everyone knows that it will be Glasswing today with Anthropic, tomorrow is OpenAI, but the foundational models are growing leaps and bounds. And I do have a video.
Agentic AI is already transforming your organization, opening up new opportunities and new risks. Risks that traditional human-centric security frameworks were not built to handle. In a threat landscape that now includes not just thousands of human employees operating at human speed, but millions of autonomous AI agents operating at machine speed. So now, in order to seize those opportunities successfully, you need a unified security and management approach that empowers you to track all those identities, control what they access, and set safeguards for how they behave. How do you meet all these needs? By extending zero trust principles to agentic AI with Cisco. Because it's only when you have end-to-end security controls across identity, access, and behavior that you can unlock agent visibility and identity management, so you can discover, monitor, and manage non-human identities of agents, mapping them back to accountable humans. Granular access control, so you can deploy fine-grained access policies based on identity-aware context to provide least privileged, time-bound access to agents. And real-time behavioral monitoring, so you can establish safety and security guardrails during runtime and prevent unsafe or unintended actions. Security and identity fused seamlessly into the network, securing agentic AI operations end-to-end. So all those opportunities you're now seizing, at high speed and massive scale, you can be confident you're seizing securely. Integrated, unified, and secure by design. That's zero trust for agentic AI from Cisco.
That 1 minute kind of summarizes my 25 minutes of banter, but I really do appreciate the audience today. Cisco is the critical infrastructure for the AI era. We want to define the way, the AI-ready data centers that carry your legacy and AI, AI workloads, defining the modern workplace, how agents and humans and non-humans work together, and to build a resilient network. So with that, I was going to say thank you very much for your time. Hope to be back in Taipei again very soon, and thank you again.